Greetings. In this video, we will sculpt a skull. We'll start by importing our reference images, view image plane, import image. In the side view, we'll come to view, image plane, import image. And in our perspective view, let's grab both of those image planes and we'll scale them up so that they're about the size of the overall grid. That'll be a good working size. We'll also pull them off from the center of our perspective view. In our front view, we want to center this, so we want that center line coming right through the nose, right through the center of the teeth, because we'll be working symmetrically. And then final thing before we start, if we come to the channel box, right, I have this plane selected, and if we come down to alpha gain, we put that to about 0.2. It's a little bit easier to see our model if we turn down the alpha of our reference images. So there are our reference images, and we're just going to start with a basic polygonal sphere. And we'll use a combination of soft select and sculpt surfaces to create a skull sculpt. Scale this up about there, and we can kind of scale in that direction. Come into the side, get the overall shape there. Now, we will begin with some soft select. So right, my soft select is on. I tap the B to turn that off and on. And we're going to be creating some bounding box selections. And let's be very careful to make those bounding box selections only in the orthographic views. If we make a bounding box selection in the perspective view, it's arbitrarily selected. But if I make a bounding box selection here, you see that it's symmetrically selected there. So when we draw a bounding box, we want to make sure that we're doing it in the orthographic view. I'm in the side view. I can hit the 4 key if I want to kind of see through that. Hold the B key, tap the B key, excuse me, and we can pull that to fit. We can pull this forward, pull this back a little bit, and let's talk about not just moving, but we can also rotate. So I'm going to rotate that forward and pull out this chin a little bit. Grab this, pull it up, and we'll figure that's going to be about there. And this is just a process of making your model generally fit. We're not going to have this level of detail in the jaw. We're concerned primarily with the face and the overall generalized shape. Don't forget that the B key, right, allows us to change if we want to have a much finer control. Maybe we want fine control here. So B key to change that size. Make that fit there. Our nose, right, we're not going to have that level of detail for this sculpt, but we can pull that, and don't forget that we can also scale. Another tip, don't spend too much time in one view without manipulating a little bit in another view. Sometimes you'll end up wasting time because you realize, oh, I should have been seeing this in one of the other views. Making the brush larger, we've got that there. This is contouring fine. We can pull that kind of in. Now, the bottom, this jawline here is very pronounced on a skull, so we'll pull that out and we'll pull this in, right? Here's where the cheekbones are. And let's talk about some symmetry. So I've been drawing bounding boxes, but now I'm to the point where I just like to pull out the cheek, but I want it on the other side, and so we know we have symmetry available to us. And so let's think in that view there. Come back to a big selection and turn that off. If you leave this on, you will get a funny, it's double transforming. So when you use the bounding box method, make sure that symmetry is off, right? Because I wanted to just get this part of the skull a little bit larger. Okay, so that's just our very, very basic shape. You would want to save, increment and save at this point, right? And I see here, I can do a little bit more here before we save. There we go, something like that. Pull down that tip of the chin, that was too much, so I'll hold the B key and pull that down. Right, and you can move a little bit, make your brush larger. And don't forget that you can rotate, right? So that was a lot easier to rotate that. Rotating this, right? Give yourself a nice sharp. Maybe we'll get that brush a little bit larger. And we've got a okay skull shape, right? So definitely you'd want to save this. Anytime we're going to smooth this once just to give ourselves some more detail to be able to push back the eye cavity, create that nose shape. You could even paint on this level of mesh. Yeah, so let's come to mesh smooth. And now we have enough information to really begin using the sculpt surface tool. So I'm going to come now, turn my soft select off. I'll even just click off here. Sculpt tool. And I'm going to double click that tool. And let's just put the toolbox, the tool settings next to our outliner. So here's our outliner. Here's our tool settings, our tools available to us. This is our sculpt is currently available here. You can see that symmetry is on, and when you're using the sculpt tool, as I mentioned in that preliminary video, the symmetry is off on, not turned on here. It's turned on here in the tool itself. So again, sculpt, double click this sculpt tool that we're using, and we're going to use symmetry. I'll hold down the B key to make the brush size, and we can just push a little bit there, kind of hard to see. And I went the wrong way, didn't I? We'll come back here. I want to have the control key. So I'll click and push that. And so we've got the general view, and we can smooth that out a little bit. Also going to get rid of my grid. Maybe pull out a little bit where the nose would be. And then we'll think about where our mouth is. And I'm going to just push a little bit. That's probably too much. And so I'll come back and just smooth that out. And that's about it. If you wanted to, right, we can give ourselves a little bit of a temple here. We can give ourselves some cheekbone, right? The cheekbone is very pronounced on the skeleton. Maybe that's a little too much. We got that there. And then, right, we can kind of push in, and we'll smooth that. And then the brow. Now that's too much. I'm going to hold down the M key, right, and pull that down, and just too much. So cheekbone comes in here. We don't have a full nose, right, because we're going to be painting. And a little bit of that, and we've got a decent skull to paint on. So again, this is a sculpt and not a model, so it's going to be a lot more generalized, and we're to the point where we'd like to begin painting on it. So you certainly want to save, increment it and save, and yeah, let's talk about painting in the next section. All right, so a little bit more refinement on there, but we'll assume that this is done. We'll take our image planes. You no longer need them, you could delete them, but let's put them on a layer, and then we can hide them. And let's paint the skull. So we'll first go in. You need to have this saved. So for the paint effects to work, you have to have a saved file. We'll come to rendering and texturing 3D paint tool, and we'll open that. And because we'll be using it, let's just set it here next to the outliner. I'm going to minimize the outliner, just tap there, right, to bring it back, tap it, tap it. Here's our 3D paint tool, and the first thing we need to do is hit Assign Textures. And I'm going to use 2000. If you're working on a laptop or a computer that's not very powerful, you'd probably want to do 1000. You could do 512, but the image will be very pixelated. And then if you have a very robust computer, you could go all the way up to 4000. I'm just going to do it at 2000, and that'll be really sufficient for outputting high-def video. Also using this as a JPEG in case we wanted to open it in Photoshop. And then we'll hit Assign. And now we're ready to paint. We'll come up to Paint Effects, and we'll open the browser there. It dumps us right into the Paint Effects browser. And we'll come down, and before I start painting, I'm going to flood this. So we can use flood paint just to go overall. And I'll give it just maybe a light gray and hit flood. And so that floods it. Now, you could, take the time to kind of really lay out some nice background. And I'm just going to do this over the face. You can do the back later, but just for time, right, we'll just give it some variability so it just doesn't look artificial. What's great about the paint effects is that it gives us a real natural organic media feel versus kind of CGI can look very sterile and very artificial. These paint effects give us that kind of organic analog feel. First thing we want to do is just block out. Now, if I could do these one at a time, right? That's certainly doable. I'm hitting the undo 3 times. In order to undo your paint stroke, you're undoing the stroke, the application, and then the paint itself. So it's 3 times hitting the Z key. And I want to come down here to stroke and reflection. Now this is good for blocking because it is slow and it tends to create a kind of straight line. So if you're trying to draw a real nice curve, it won't reflect nicely. So what you kind of want to do is just block it out and then come back and with reflection off, do your fine tuning. So reflection is there, and we'll just kind of give ourselves the basic. You see that it takes a moment to update. Turn that off, and we'll just give ourselves our basic nose shape, right? We're just kind of blocking. Now, as I lay down the mouth, I want it to be on an edge in case we want to come back and break it, if we want to have the mouth actually open. So as we paint the teeth of the skull, we want to do those on an edge. So I'll click on my wireframe on shaded icon here, and that'll allow me to lay this down right on the edge. Go ahead and turn that back off. If you look at painted faces, if you're doing a theatrical painted face, they will get that jawline of the skull by painting black here. And so we'll kind of do the same thing. I'm just using this blue just to block that out. Here's where our brows would be. Maybe I do want reflection on there if I wanted it to be exactly the same. But right, it doesn't lay down super smooth. So let's say that was it. You could then come back, turn reflection off, and kind of contour. And we'll do this quite a bit, or it's a technique that you can employ where you lay down, right, and you can come back with white or a lighter color and give yourself contour. Maybe we want that to be very thin on the edges, right? I didn't make that very thin, but I can come back and update that. Maybe you think this is too close, right? You could pull it off that way. Hitting the Z key 3 times to undo. So just some basic blocking, and then I'm still in oils, and I like this. Right, we've got oil black, but it's not truly black, right? It's kind of light, and that's that organic variability that's really nice about the paint effects. So you can lay that down. B key, right, to make that smaller. And I think we have this kind of upside down heart. B key. B key. And then I can, again, come back, and if we wanted to make this a little bit sharper, now let me just mention, because this will happen often, maybe you click off and you want to evaluate it, or you're doing a quick render. Now you've lost your tools. So with the object selected, and you can come up to texturing 3D paint tool, but if you're doing this often, you can just have your rendering shelf open, and there it is. You can click on it, and then this pops back open, and let's say even your paint effects were gone. Click there and you get them back. Let me just review that again. Let's say you click off, let's say you close everything, or you've opened it up new. How do we get back to the paint effects? Pick it as an object. If you've got your rendering shelf, you can click here. If your shelf wasn't available to you, you can come up to texturing 3D paint tool, open that. The tool will open here. You can click here to get to your browser, and you're back in business. Now, I recommend building up color. Think back to your painting class or your experience with traditional analog material, and how you build up a painting, how you wash a painting. But I'm going to skip a little bit. One of the other tools that I use a lot in this demo is the simple line. Right, this is a real black, and so you don't want to lay it down big like that, but if you need just a thin black line, and even that's too big, I'm hitting undo 3 times, right, and we can begin to outline those things. Maybe for this, I'm going to undo that. Right, if we want to give some outline to these shapes, I'm a little too small. Right. And I think this is a nice piece to have in your portfolio, one where you demonstrate kind of hand manipulated. As I mentioned a moment ago, things in the computer in CGI can look very artificial, very sterile, very machine-like. And if you just take the time to do some painting, you get a real nice piece for your portfolio that shows that you can make CGI look hand painted or hand drawn. Now, I would recommend at this point just keep building up your black and white, and then once you get all of your design, you can begin to color it in. So I'm going to load my skull that has the completed black and white design. Spend 30, 45, 60 minutes building your black on white. Come back and we'll talk about color. All right, so again, we'll pick it as an object. we'll click on our 3D paint tool. We'll click to get our content browser with our paint effects. And now, right, we've got our lines drawn out. You have some options here. We could come to the watercolor, and if you pick the watercolor, and I'm making this brush smaller, right, you can just get some, generally you see that it's showing through your black and white. And so you can build up. It'll get dark if you keep going over the top. So I'm going to hit undo. And just lightly, giving it some color. You can choose some of these different colors, right? And you can build up kind of a wash color approach. And that's interesting. Play around. You want to save and save as, increment and save. Experiment on this black and white head. You might work a little bit and say, you know what, I don't actually like that. So you want to be able to go back to a previously saved version. But once you've got a wash down, then you can also come and we can paint more directly. The oils, of course, which we looked at, will give us some real opaque color, right? And that's even too much. If you want to have a real hard line, these oils will give you that. You can't really see through that. If that's an approach you like, that's fine. The pencils are what I like because it makes it easy to choose different colors. We can, let's say we're putting down this blue, and I like how that all the other hue is showing through. And if we want to change color when we're working with pencils or markers, we can just come and change the color, right? And we see that there. Now it's a little bit additive. I guess we would say manipulating the color, but right, you get some interesting results. So not pure green, but kind of blue-green. And spend some time going around and painting and filling in. You can think of it like a coloring book where you're just following the lines, or you can think of it like you're tracing over the top. All right. Questions in the discussion?